On back to the world of politics. This is quite incredible, actually. The Sunday Telegraph is reporting that Rishi Sunak will ask leading supermarkets to cap the price of basic food, such as bread and milk, in order to help tackle the cost of living crisis. The government have started work on a deal, apparently, with supermarkets akin to an agreement in France in which the country's major retailers charge the lowest possible amount for some essential food products. This would be the biggest intervention since Edward Heath's imposition of price controls in 1973. Currently, Number 10 say any action would be voluntary. But what does this mean? Is this socialism come to life? Joining me now is Lance Forman, former London MEP and CEO of London Cure Smoked Salmon, and Aaron Bastani, co-founder of Novara Media. Thank you very much to both of you for joining me on this one. I was quite shocked to see this on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, Lance. This seems to be, well, put it frankly, a communist policy.
Yes, I don't know what to say. I mean, Rishi Sunak seems to be very keen to make the British population more adept at mathematics. But I think he needs to go back to economics classes. Because one of the first things you learn in economics is that price is determined by the matching of supply and demand. And if you fix the price and demand is the same, supply reduces. We will end up with shortages. That's what happens with price controls. You end up with shortages, it distorts competition, it encourages waste. It is just a bad policy. There are ways to help people through this, but price control is not the route.
Aaron, what's wrong with what Lance said there?
Well, I wouldn't say what's wrong with it. I would say, look, the politics of the situation are this. We have interest rates now at 4.5%. I think realistically, to get inflation down, they're going to have to go beyond 6%. People are saying 6%. I mean, I've heard serious people say 7, 8%. And we're a year out from a general election. Food inflation is still 19%. Interest rates looking at 6% plus. I think Rishi Sunak, quite frankly, is looking at that situation and realises with great justification that if he doesn't do anything, the Tories have no chance of forming a government. And that's the politics of this situation. Now, we can have a debate about how do you help people suffering at the sort of coalface of food inflation. Like I say, headline inflation is down, food inflation is still 19% for this month. So how do you help those people? Some people might say you help on the demand side, you give them cash payments. What he's saying is we want to help a little bit with regards to, not supply, because we don't quite know how this is going to work. It's going to be voluntary. But you can see a situation, for instance, where the government might subsidise supermarkets to provide cheap cheese, milk, bread. Cheese, Emily, cheese has gone up 39%. Some forms of hard cheese have gone up 39% in the last 12 months. So the politics of this are why this is happening. And I think, frankly, the government doesn't really have any good choices here.
But I think, Aaron, Lance, isn't the government if this does go ahead, aren't they treating us like idiots? I mean, why on earth would you try to cap the price, control the price at the supermarket, at the end of the supply chain? Surely if you were going to try to tackle prices, you'd help, I don't know, the farms, for example, with a subsidy if you were going to do that. Why try and do this in the supermarket? And we also know that a lot of supermarkets, unfortunately, have very small profit margins, don't they?
Well, that's absolutely right. Our supermarket industry is one of the most competitive supermarket industries in the world. I actually supply into some supermarkets, and I know when I had to increase my own prices because the cost of energy shot up and I needed to recover that cost, the supermarkets increased their price by precisely the same amount that I increased mine. They didn't try and make extra margin on it. They just increased the cash cost, what they actually needed in order to be able to run a profitable business. They are not gouging consumers. If one supermarket was charging too high a price, the others would love it because they go in cheaper and win more customers. We have a very competitive industry. What the government could do, for example, is it could reduce import tariffs on food. We import a lot of food. You could get rid of all the tariffs on coffee, bananas, olive oil, oranges, and so on. They could do that. But ultimately, what they need to do to help consumers is reduce the cost of living. Our energy costs are way too high because our net zero policy. Our housing is way too high because we haven't built enough homes. These are the things that we really need to do. They're not short-term fixes, but if the government's serious about helping people, we've got to start changing the supply side.
Aaron, isn't Lance right there when he talks about the benefits of a free market insofar as businesses will compete with one another to be most desirable to consumers? We have a very busy supermarket industry in this country, and we do see supermarkets trying to bring in the lowest prices to get consumers in. That's why Aldi and Lidl have been so popular and why Waitrose is trying to price match, for example. But do you buy into the idea that what we're seeing actually is greedflation, i.e. supermarkets and other businesses are purposefully trying to rip us off?
So with regards to supermarkets, I generally don't think that's the case. No, it's important to say that their margins have gone up on pre-pandemic. I think in 2021, the big supermarkets had £3 to £4 billion profit, way up on 2019. But as Lance says, it's a very competitive market. You can't really play silly buggers, proverbially, with regards to price gouging. However, there are big parts of the UK economy where that is happening. So if you look at food processing, logistics, obviously the big energy companies, oil refineries. Now, I'm not going to say why this is happening, but the profits in each of those industries I just mentioned are massively up on 2019, massively. And so there is an interesting point here, which is to say, OK, if the government's going to intervene in prices and help the consumer at the end of the supply chain, I think you're right. Probably supermarkets isn't the place to do this because they aren't the ones seeing the biggest rise in profits on 2019. And as Lance says, it's a very competitive sector. But then I suppose, you only have hard options here. And that's, I think, the easiest one. A harder option, obviously, is to get involved in the food processing supply chain or, like you say, do something with tariffs. That's very difficult. So I think, to me, this is classic Tories over the last couple of years, which is there's a big problem. You have a solution which is proposed, which is going to really annoy your base. But even that doesn't go far enough, really, to address the root cause of the problem. And as Lance said, realistically, these aren't solutions over the medium to longer term. This is really about the politics of the next general election.
Yes, I mean, if this were this fantastic silver bullet, Lance, they would have done this quite a long time ago because we have had high food inflation for rather a while. It does seem a little delayed if it were going to work. But just finally, Lance, if we think about the practicalities of this, OK, a supermarket, let's say Sainsbury's, says, OK, Rishi Sunak will cap the price of bread and milk and eggs or whatever, all the basics, cheese. Well, then they'll just put their prices up on other products, won't they?
Well, of course they will do. They have to. They've got to remain in business, and to remain in business, it means they have to be profitable. And so, if they can't make profit on the bread or the milk, they'll end up having to make it somewhere else, or they'll just ration it. They just won't have. They'll just have empty shelves with bread and milk because they won't want to sell it because they'll be selling. Selling it at a loss. So, it's for the government to